Howdy brewers, welcome to this week's Homebrew Weekly. Tonight we're going to learn how to reculture some yeast from bottle conditioned beers. First point is, make sure you leave enough beer in the bottle so you don't pour all the yeast out when you're trying to make your starter. I'm using some extra malt brewing sugar, which has dextrose, maltodextrin and dry malt extract, and this will make it a bit easier with the dextrose, make it a bit easier for the yeast to make sure they get a good starter and you generate a lot of yeast cells. Best part about making your own yeast starter from bottle conditioned beer is you get to enjoy a couple of beers before you make the starter. Okay, I've weighed out 150 grams of dry malt extract and dextrose, and I'm going to make a 1.5 litre starter, and 150 grams gets me a gravity of around 1040, which is what you're aiming for any starter gravity. I'll boil this for about 5 minutes to make sure it's sterilised and sanitised, and then I'll put it in the Erlenmeyer flask and make it up to 1.5 litres, and then I'll add the yeast. One thing I forgot to mention is that with this starter wort, it's going to be a hoppy beer, being an American or an Australian amber ale, and so I'm going to make sure I add some hops to this starter wort. And we're just pouring our starter wort into our Erlenmeyer flask. It's been boiling for 5 minutes. I know I didn't have 1.5 litres in my pot, but we'll make that 1.5 litres up with some cool tap water. Well, we'll get to almost 1.5 litres, and then we'll add our yeast from our bottles. Alright, before we add our yeast from our bottles, got to make sure we stir it up. Get all that yeast off the bottom. And we do that for all the bottles that we have the yeast from. Okay, now we've got our starter wort with our yeast from our bottles, and it's in an Erlenmeyer flask with a stir bar, and in about 48 hours that'll be at peak krausen, and we'll be able to add it to our beer.